Ken Klippenstein is, in my opinion, the most underrated journalist in America. And he just dropped a story that should be breaking news all across the country. But of course it isn't. It's being largely ignored by mainstream media. So take a look here. He says, Scoop, Saudi Arabia is spending up to $450,000 per month to lobby the Trump administration on uranium enrichment for a nuclear program. The money is going to a law firm that represents Trump's real estate empire. Oh, goodness. So now we're having a conversation about a nuclear Saudi Arabia. Wow. Ken continues here. Just 5 days after Saudi Arabia registered to lobby the Trump administration, Energy Secretary Rick Perry abruptly canceled a trip to India so he could fly to London to discuss a nuclear cooperation agreement with senior Saudi officials. Saudi Arabia claims it only wants a civilian nuclear program for energy, but refuses to sign an agreement prohibiting it from pursuing a nuclear weapons program. Holy shit. So, stop and think about our different standards for different countries. When it's an official state enemy, our hair's on fire, can't believe that they're about to have nuclear weapons or they're trying to get nuclear weapons. In the case of Iran, it was constantly threatening war, constantly threatening war, constantly threatening war. There was a good deal that was made with the Obama administration in Iran. One of the best things that Obama did was the Iran nuclear deal. And basically, in that instance, the IAEA gets to check Iran, their nuclear program, regulate the shit out of it, and then in response, the United States gives Iran back their own money that we stole from them. So that was a great deal. But now Trump is trying to blow it up, and they're threatening war again with Iran over their nuclear program. North Korea, same thing. Now, thankfully, there may be about to be talks between the North Korean government and the U.S. government, but Trump was recently just threatening them on Twitter with their weapons program. No, you can't let them have a weapons program. Only one thing will work. Only one thing will work. Talking about how we should go and attack and do an offensive strike. But when it's Saudi Arabia, by the way, the number one exporter of terrorism by far and away. By far and away. They love to say Iran is that. That's nowhere near true. That's comically false. It's Saudi Arabia. They spread Wahhabi Islam all across the globe. That's the most ultra-conservative, far-right, literalist version of Islam, which is the exact ideology that ISIS has, Al-Qaeda has. So they build radical mosques all over the place. They're butchering and committing a genocide in Yemen right now. Committing a genocide right now in Yemen. Blockaded the country. There's a cholera epidemic. Millions of people are struggling. People are starving to death. They're bombing hospitals, mosques. They're bombing open-air markets, schools. So this country, which is carrying out a genocide, oppressing their own people, and building radical mosques all across the globe, we're now having a conversation about them getting nuclear weapons. Now, again, they say, well, look, it's only for nuclear enrichment, for our power grid. That's all. It's just for science and research and nuclear enrichment for our power grid. Well, okay, then why not sign on to an agreement prohibiting the creation of nuclear weapons? Oh, you didn't do that. Why didn't they do that? They didn't do that because they actually want nuclear weapons. But there were articles that we covered in the past of them just getting nuclear weapons from Pakistan, having a close relationship with Pakistan and just getting them off the shelf, they call it, an off-the-shelf nuclear weapon from Pakistan. But this is, now we're having a conversation about, because of the money they're spending in Washington lobbying the Trump administration, they might end up getting it through official channels. And Washington might be okay with it because corruption is that deep, where a Republican administration in Washington, who's supposed to be tough on radical Islamic terrorism, they say they are, for the right price, they will let the most radical country with the most extreme ideology, hey, maybe we'll let them get a nuke. Because, hey, you spend $450,000 a month lobbying us, And that's all we care about is the green. So you give us enough money, we might be totally fine with you getting a nuclear weapon. You want to talk about, they love talking about interference in our politics. Russia interferes in our politics. Russia interferes in our politics. $450,000 per month to lobby the Trump administration on uranium enrichment. $450,000 per month. How's that for interfering in our politics? Trying to buy our approval for them to get a nuke. By the way, Saudi Arabia beheads people for sorcery and witchcraft. Think about that. Sorcery and drug smuggling. But Trump loves that. They kill drug dealers. Trump loves that. He just said he wants to do that at a fucking rally. We just covered the story. So, backwards ideology. Oh, you want nukes? $450,000 a month? Maybe. Let's have that conversation. Let's sit down. Let's talk it out. Because when you're our ally, you get away with whatever the fuck you want to get away with. Israel, you want to build more illegal settlements under international law and do permanent apartheid and bomb the shit out of Palestinian children every few years, cut the grass as they call it. Hey, you're our friend, so whatever. And look at what happens. They lobby Washington. By the way, they spent $270,000 at a Trump hotel. And then look at that. Lo and behold, Donald Trump turns around and gives them over a $100 billion weapons deal. Here's your real collusion. The real collusion is when, Israel tries to get the U.S. to push the UN to not condemn their illegal settlements. That's what happened. We covered that story. That's what happened. Real collusion is when Saudi Arabia spends a tremendous amount of money on Donald Trump and his administration, and then he does a $100 billion weapons deal with them, and then they use those weapons to massacre children in Yemen. There's your collusion. Collusion is spending $450,000 per month on lobbying the Trump administration to let them have nukes. And nobody's talking about this, because if you're Israel or you're Saudi Arabia, you get away with whatever the fuck you want to get away with. You're our ally. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's not scandalous. It's not controversial. It's not even worth mentioning. Like I told, go turn on mainstream media, go turn on corporate media. I'm not sure there's been a single story of this. But this is a giant deal, man. This is a giant deal. Everything is for sale. Everybody in the government, they're corrupt, open to bribery, and this is nothing but a version of legalized bribery. A radical regime wants nukes, and we're open to that, man. We'll sit down, we'll have that conversation, because you're paying $450,000 a month. Do you understand what happens in a situation like that? You think Saudi Arabia is a stable country in the long run? Is that what you think? Look at what happened with ISIS not that long ago. ISIS took over giant swaths in Iraq and Syria. These are fanatical people, true fundamentalist Kool-Aid drinkers, who thought they were fighting for God, and they took over giant swaths of territory in Iraq and in Syria. You don't think they're similar people ideologically in Saudi Arabia? You think it's such a stable country? Let me ask you a question. What happens when the world finally gets off oil, which we have to do at some point if this species wants to survive? The world finally gets off oil. The Saudi economy collapses. It's based entirely on oil. So what happens when a country which is well off, at least the elites in that country are well off, when that collapses? What happens? What happens when the world economy gets off oil, Saudi Arabia collapses, you have unrest mixed with toxic, extremist, fundamentalist ideologies, and oh yeah, by the way, there's that country has nukes. What happens? You should be shuddering at the thought. But this is something the idiots in Washington don't care to think about, because, hey, we're getting $450,000 a month is being spent to influence policy, so maybe we don't care about the future destabilization of Saudi Arabia and the extremist ideologies that might end up getting their hands on nuclear weapons. This is what happens when corruption rules the day.